Hello, my friends, and welcome. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Which country? Which place? You can share it in the comments so we can see how far this little story travels. Wherever you are, I hope you can take this moment just for yourself. Maybe your day was busy, maybe it was quiet, maybe it was heavy. Whatever it was, you're here now, and here is a safe, gentle place. In the next little while, I'll share a story, the journey of a monk who learns a simple truth: let go or be dragged. It's a truth that lives in rivers, in wind, and in the way the world changes without asking us first. So, get comfortable. Let your body rest. Breathe in deeply, and as you breathe out, imagine the noise of the day slowly drifting away. Let's begin this journey together. The morning mist lay low over the river, turning the water into a mirror of pale silver. A monk stood on the wooden bridge, watching leaves drift along the slow current. His robe was worn thin from years of travel, and the bamboo staff in his hand had smoothed under his palm from long use. His name was Ansu, though few called him by it. To most who met him, he was simply the traveling monk. Ansu had left his mountain temple many seasons ago, carrying with him no more than a small pack, a cup, and the teachings of his old master. He walked from village to village, not seeking anything in particular, but open to whatever the path might bring. He often remembered the last words his master spoke before he left: let go or be dragged. At first, he had not understood those words. Let go of what, and dragged by whom? The answer did not come easily, so he carried the question with him like a stone in his pocket, always aware of its weight but unsure of its shape. This morning, as the mist began to rise and the sun warmed the earth, Ansu crossed the bridge into a small riverside village. Fishermen were returning with baskets of silver fish, and women were washing clothes by the bank. Children ran along the water's edge, laughing. It was a peaceful place. But Ansu could feel under the quiet the same thing he felt everywhere: the undercurrent of worry, fear, and longing that flowed through people's lives. He walked slowly down the main street until he found a shaded place beside a large banyan tree. Setting his pack down, he sat cross-legged, closed his eyes, and simply listened. The sounds of the village wove together: the clatter of pots, the creak of a cartwheel, the murmur of conversation. His breathing fell into rhythm with it all. Before long, a young man approached him. The man's face was tense, his steps quick. He stopped before the monk and bowed slightly. "Sir, you look like a man who has traveled far. I wonder if you can tell me how to stop my mind from hurting me." Ansu opened his eyes and studied the man's expression. There was pain there, not from injury, but from something carried too long. "What is it your mind clings to?" Ansu asked softly. The young man hesitated, then told his story. He had lost his father in a storm a year ago. Since then, he had replayed the day over and over in his head: what he might have done differently, how he might have saved him. The weight of guilt was dragging him, and the harder he tried to run from it, the more it followed. Ansu listened without interruption. When the man finished, Ansu reached into his pack and took out a small clay cup. He held it out and said, "Imagine this is your pain. Hold it for a moment." The man took the cup. Now Ansu continued, "Keep holding it as you follow me." They walked slowly through the village. The man's arm began to tire. They walked farther, past the rice fields, until sweat dotted the young man's forehead. Finally, Ansu stopped by the riverbank. "Your arm hurts now." "Yes," the man nodded. "It is not the cup that grows heavier," said Ansu. "It is the time you spend holding it. Pain is the same. Hold it for a while to understand it, but if you never set it down, it will drag you until you fall." The man stared at the cup, then at the river. Slowly, he placed it on the ground. Ansu smiled, picked up his staff, and turned back toward the village. "Let go or be dragged," he said quietly, as if to himself. That night, Ansu stayed under the banyan tree. The villagers brought him food, rice, vegetables, tea. As the stars came out, he lay back and looked at them through the shifting branches. He thought again about his master's words. Perhaps letting go was not forgetting, but releasing the grip that turned memory into a chain. The next morning, he resumed his journey. The road led him away from the river and into the hills, where bamboo groves swayed in the wind. Birds flitted between the stalks, their calls echoing softly. Ansu moved at the same pace as the land, unhurried but steady. By midday, he reached a narrow pass where the path became little more than a line of stones. There he met an old woman struggling to carry a heavy bundle of firewood. Her back was bent, her steps slow. Without a word, Ansu took part of the load and walked beside her. They traveled together until they reached her home, a small hut by a stream. She thanked him and offered him a seat on a flat stone outside. The woman spoke of her life. Her children had all moved to distant towns. She lived alone now, carrying her own water, cutting her own wood. There was no bitterness in her voice, only a kind of quiet acceptance. Ansu asked, "Do you not miss them?" "Of course," she said. "But I learned long ago that missing someone is like standing in the rain and wishing it were dry. The sky will not change for you. You must change how you stand beneath it." Ansu felt the truth in her words. Letting go was not only about pain, it was also about loosening the rope of longing. Too tight a hold on anything, even love, could pull a person into sorrow. He stayed with the old woman until evening, helping her gather water and stack wood. As the moon rose, he thanked her and continued on. For several days, Ansu traveled through forest paths, over ridges, and across small streams. He met others along the way, a merchant who had lost his fortune, a farmer angry at the drought, a young girl who feared she would never leave her village. In each, he saw the same pattern. The harder they clung to what had already passed, or what had not yet come, the more they were dragged by it. One afternoon, he came to a broad plain where the wind swept across the grass in long waves. There was a lone traveler there, sitting beside the road, weeping. Ansu approached and sat quietly next to him. The traveler spoke of betrayal. A friend he had trusted for years had cheated him in a trade, leaving him penniless. "I want to make him suffer," the man said. "Every day I think about how to make him pay." Ansu picked up a stone from the ground and placed it in the traveler's hand. "Carry this as far as you can," he said. The man frowned but obeyed. They walked together for some distance. Soon the man's hand began to ache. He tried to shift the stone from one hand to the other, but both grew tired. "You can put it down whenever you wish," Ansu said. "But that would mean letting him go," the traveler replied. "Yes," Ansu said, and letting go means you will no longer be dragged. The man stopped walking. Slowly, he placed the stone back on the ground. The wind caught his hair, and for the first time since Ansu had met him, he looked upward instead of back. They parted ways at a fork in the road, and Ansu walked on, his mind turning over the many forms of holding and the many shapes of letting go. It was not always about objects or people. Sometimes it was about beliefs, fears, or even dreams that no longer served. By the time the sun began to set, painting the sky with soft fire, Ansu found himself near a shallow lake. The surface reflected the colors above so perfectly that it was hard to see where the water ended and the sky began. He sat at the shore, closed his eyes, and breathed in the scent of the evening. The lake was still, yet beneath the surface there was movement, fish, currents, life unseen. Letting go, he thought, was not about stillness without movement. It was about finding peace within the flow. That night, he slept under the open sky. Dreams came to him of bridges over mist, of stones placed gently on the ground, of ropes unknotted, and in each dream there was a sense of walking forward without being pulled back. When dawn broke, Ansu rose, shouldered his pack, and continued his path, not knowing where it would lead, but trusting that each step was part of the answer to his master's words. Somewhere ahead, perhaps, the full meaning waited. Ansu followed the narrow dirt road as it curved through the hills. The morning air was crisp, scented with wild herbs and damp earth. The sun was only just rising, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the ground. Each step felt steady, unhurried, as though the world itself was walking with him. By midday, he came upon a small village nestled in a valley between two green slopes. A stream ran through the center, and stone houses stood in neat rows along either side. The village seemed calm, yet, as Ansu passed, he noticed the people carried a heaviness in their eyes. They glanced at him but said nothing. He stopped by a well to drink, lowering the bucket and lifting the cool water to his lips. As he drank, a middle-aged man approached, his face drawn with worry. "You are a monk, yes?" the man asked. Ansu nodded. "Please, come with me," the man said. "There is someone who might need your help." Without hesitation, Ansu followed him through narrow lanes until they reached a modest home with its door half open. Inside, an elderly man lay on a bed, his breathing shallow. Beside him, a young woman, perhaps his daughter, sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her eyes were red from crying. "He will not eat," the man who had brought Ansu explained. "Ever since my father lost his land in a dispute, he has refused food, saying life is not worth living." Ansu sat quietly by the old man's side. "Tell me," he said gently, "what troubles you so deeply?" The old man turned his face away. "Everything I worked for is gone. My fields, my cattle, my name. I am nothing now." Ansu remained silent for a time, letting the air between them grow still. Then he reached into his pack and took out a folded piece of cloth. He spread it on the table. Inside was a handful of seeds. "Once," he said, "I planted seeds on rocky ground. They did not grow. I could have kept staring at the stones, waiting for them to become soil. But instead, I walked to another field and planted again." The old man looked at the seeds in silence. "You have lost your field," Ansu continued, but you have not lost the ability to plant. Let go of the soil that is no longer yours, or you will never find the ground that will welcome you." The daughter's eyes softened. She touched her father's hand. "Perhaps we can start again," she whispered. For the first time since Ansu had entered, the old man's gaze shifted. He looked at his daughter, then at the seeds, and finally at Ansu. "Perhaps," he murmured. Ansu stayed that night in the village. The family gave him a place by the hearth. In the flicker of firelight, he thought again about how tightly people clung to the past. To be dragged was not always about being pulled backward by pain. Sometimes it was being anchored to what no longer existed, refusing to step onto new ground. The next morning, he rose early and left quietly, his staff tapping softly against the earth as he walked toward the mountains in the distance. The road narrowed into a path lined with wildflowers. The mountains loomed closer with each step, their peaks dusted with snow. 2 days later, as the air grew colder, Ansu reached a wide river with no bridge. On the far bank stood a group of travelers with carts and animals, all waiting. A wooden ferry was tied to the near shore, but the ferryman sat stubbornly on the deck, shaking his head at the crowd. Curious, Ansu approached. "Why do you not take them across?" he asked. "They will not pay my price," the ferryman said. "So they will wait here until they do." The travelers argued among themselves, each unwilling to pay what the ferryman demanded. The sun rose high, then began to sink again, and still they waited. Ansu sat by the water, watching the current. After a while, he stood, waded into the shallow part, and began to cross. The water reached his waist, cold and swift, but he moved steadily until he reached the far side. The travelers stared. The ferryman scowled. From the opposite bank, Ansu called, "Sometimes the price is not worth the waiting. Let go of the road you expect, and you will find another way forward." One by one, a few travelers followed him into the water. Some slipped, some laughed, some cursed, but eventually they reached the far side. The ferryman shouted after them, but his voice was lost to the sound of the river. That night, Ansu camped under a stand of pines. He made a small fire and warmed his hands. Above him, the sky was clear, every star sharp in the cold air. He thought of how people often waited for the perfect conditions, the perfect price, the perfect answer, the perfect moment, and how such waiting could become a dragging weight. Sometimes letting go meant moving forward even when the way was not smooth. In the days that followed, Ansu's path climbed higher into the mountains. The air was thin, the wind sharp. Villages here were small, their houses built of stone and wood to withstand the cold. In one such village, he found shelter in a communal hall where travelers were welcome to rest. There, he met a young boy sitting alone by the fire. The boy stared into the flames, his face clouded. Ansu sat beside him. "Why do you look so troubled?" Ansu asked. "My brother and I fought," the boy said. "He took my knife and will not give it back. I hate him now." Ansu listened, then pointed to the fire. "Do you see how the flames leap upward?" The boy nodded. "If I take a burning stick and hold it tightly in my hand, it will hurt me," Ansu said. "Hating is like that. You hold it thinking it will burn the other, but it burns you instead." The boy frowned, then looked again at the fire. "But if I let it go, I have nothing." You have your hand unburned, Ansu replied. The boy sat quietly for a long while, then left the hall. Later, Ansu saw him return with his brother, the two of them speaking in low voices. The next morning, as Ansu prepared to leave, the boy came to him and said, I put the stick down. Ansu smiled. Then you can walk without pain. Leaving the mountain village, Ansu descended into a wide valley. The air was warmer here, and the land rich with crops. In one town, he came upon a marketplace filled with color and noise. Merchants shouted their prices, children darted between stalls, and the scent of roasting chestnuts filled the air. At the edge of the market, he saw a woman sitting beside a cart of pottery. She looked weary, her shoulders hunched. Several of her bowls had cracks running through them. Bad luck, she told him when he stopped. A storm knocked my cart over. No one will buy these now. Ansu picked up a cracked bowl, turning it in his hands. The break was clean, as if it could be mended. In my travels, he said, I have seen bowls repaired with gold. The cracks remain, but they become part of the beauty. The woman frowned. Who would want a broken thing? Someone who sees the story in the break, Ansu said. Let go of the thought that only the unbroken has worth. He left her then, but later, as he passed back through the market, he saw that she had arranged her cracked bowls at the front of her cart. She had painted the cracks in bright colors. People stopped to look, curious. Ansu continued on, the market noise fading behind him. The road wound between orchards heavy with fruit. He ate when he was hungry, drank from streams when he was thirsty, and rested in the shade when he grew tired. Days later, as he crossed a dry plain, he met a shepherd searching the horizon. I have lost 3 sheep, the man said. They wandered off last night. Ansu looked around. The land was open, the sheep nowhere in sight. Perhaps you will find them, he said. But what if I don't? The shepherd asked, his voice tight. Then care for the ones still with you, Ansu replied. Grieving the lost while neglecting the present will only leave you with less. The shepherd sighed, but nodded. Ansu walked on, feeling the wind against his face. The plain stretched for miles before him, and somewhere far ahead lay the next place, the next lesson. That evening, he camped near a stand of low trees. As the sky deepened into night, he thought about all the forms of letting go of pain, of anger, of expectations, of old beliefs, of what is lost. Each time, it seemed to lighten the step, allowing the road to unfold without pulling backward. When dawn came, he rose, shouldered his pack, and stepped once more into the day, ready for whatever the path might bring. The sun rose behind Ansu, casting a long shadow before him as he walked across the plain. The grass whispered in the wind, and the air held the dry scent of summer. He had no map, no fixed plan, only the quiet pull of the road ahead. The mountains he had left behind were now a pale blue line in the distance, and before him stretched rolling land dotted with clusters of trees. By midday, he came upon a small settlement where people were busy repairing their homes. Roofs were being thatched, walls patched, fences rebuilt. A man waved him over. You look like you have walked far, the man said. I have, Ansu replied, with a slight smile. The man's face was lined but kind. Come, share our meal. We had a storm 3 days ago that tore through our village. We lost much, but we have enough to share. Ansu followed him to a shaded area where several families were gathered. They offered him bread and a bowl of stew. As they ate, he listened to their talk. Some spoke with hope, planning repairs. Others sat in silence, their eyes clouded with loss. When the meal ended, a woman asked, "You are a monk, yes? Tell us, how do we stop thinking about what we lost?" Ansu looked at the pieces of broken fence and the piles of splintered wood nearby. "If your cup breaks," he said, "you cannot drink from its pieces. You must take a new cup or mend the old one. But sitting with the shards in your hands will only cut you." The woman nodded slowly. Around her, a few others exchanged quiet glances. The work continued after the meal, and Ansu joined in, carrying wood and tying bundles of straw for thatching. He stayed until the evening, then continued on, the scent of smoke and fresh cut grass following him for a time. That night, he camped beside a small lake. The surface reflected the moon in perfect stillness. As he watched, a fish leaped, shattering the image into ripples. He thought of how easily calm could be disturbed, and how it always returned when the movement passed. In the morning, he walked toward the rising sun, and by midday, he reached a dusty road lined with tall poplar trees. The wind made their leaves shimmer like coins in the light. Along the road, he met a young man sitting on a cart piled with sacks of grain. The cart's wheel was broken, and the young man was kicking at the dirt in frustration. "I was supposed to deliver this grain today," the young man said. "Now I will be late. My father will be furious." Ansu crouched to examine the wheel. "It will not fix itself," he said. "You can curse the road, or you can find a way forward." The young man sighed. "There is no way forward without the wheel." "Then find another way," Ansu said simply. He pointed toward a cluster of buildings in the distance. "Perhaps someone there has what you need." Reluctantly, the young man went to seek help. Ansu waited by the cart, enjoying the shade of the poplars. After a while, the young man returned with an older man carrying tools. Together they fixed the wheel. The young man thanked Ansu, and as he climbed onto the cart, he said, "I would have sat there all day if you hadn't spoken." Ansu smiled faintly. "Sitting is good for resting, not for moving." The road carried Ansu into a town where the streets were busy with merchants and animals. At a small square, he saw an artist painting a mural on the wall of a shop. The image was half finished, a river winding through a forest. The artist, a woman with streaks of paint on her clothes, stood back and frowned at her work. "This is not what I wanted," she muttered. "The river looks wrong. I should start over." Ansu studied the wall. "The river is fine," he said. "It only looks wrong because you are standing too close." The woman tilted her head. "Too close? When you step back, you see more than the river. You see the trees, the sky, the whole picture. Then you know the river belongs where it is." She looked again at the mural, this time from several steps away. Her frown eased. "Perhaps it's not so bad," she said. "Let go of the need for it to match the picture in your mind," Ansu told her. "Let it become what it will." He left the town in the late afternoon, following a road that wound through gentle hills. The air was warm, and the light turned golden as the sun began to sink. The next day brought him to a place where the road forked. A sign pointed left to a city and right to a monastery. Ansu stood for a moment, feeling the wind tug at his robes, then chose the monastery path. It led him through a grove of ancient trees, their branches heavy with moss. The shade was deep and cool, the ground soft with fallen leaves. The monastery was built of stone, its walls weathered by time. A bell hung above the gate, silent. Inside, he found a small garden where an old monk was raking the gravel into patterns. "Welcome," the monk said without looking up. "What brings you here?" "Rest," Ansu replied. The old monk gestured to a bench. "Sit, then." Ansu sat and watched the monk work. The rake moved slowly, making smooth lines in the gravel. At one point, a breeze disturbed the pattern. The old monk paused, then simply raked it smooth again. "Does it not trouble you when the wind changes your work?" Ansu asked. The monk smiled. "The wind changes everything. The trouble comes only if I think my lines will last forever." Ansu stayed at the monastery for 2 nights. He helped in the garden, ate simple meals, and walked the quiet paths. When he left, the old monk gave him a small stone. "It is only a stone," he said, "but if you think it is special, it will be. If you think it is ordinary, it will be. What you decide to carry will weigh you differently depending on how you see it." Ansu carried the stone in his pocket as he walked on. Sometimes he felt its weight. Sometimes he forgot it was there. The road next took him through a stretch of land where the wind was strong and constant. It bent the grass and carried the scent of far-off rain. One afternoon, he saw a woman chasing a large piece of cloth that the wind had caught. She ran, stumbled, and ran again, but the cloth only flew farther away. At last, she stopped, panting. "It's useless," she said. "The wind will not give it back." "Then let it go," Ansu said gently. She looked at him, frowning. "But I made it myself. It took days." "Perhaps the wind will give it to someone who needs it," Ansu said. "Not everything we lose is wasted." She stood still, breathing hard, then laughed a little. "Perhaps you're right." They parted ways, and Ansu walked on, thinking about how easily people wore themselves out, chasing what was already gone. In a small village further along, Ansu found an inn where he could sleep on a mat indoors. That evening, as he sat in the common room, 2 men argued at the next table. Their voices rose, and soon they were standing, fists clenched. The innkeeper tried to calm them, but they would not listen. Ansu walked over and placed a hand on the table between them. "You are both holding the rope," he said. "You can pull until it breaks, or you can drop it and be free." They stared at him, surprised, but neither spoke. Slowly, one of them stepped back. The other did the same. The room grew quiet again. Ansu returned to his mat, lay down, and listened to the wind rattling the shutters. In his mind, he saw again the image of being dragged, the hands gripping the rope, the feet scraping against the ground, and how simple, yet difficult, it was to let go. The days turned into weeks, as Ansu's path carried him farther from the mountains and deeper into open country. He met farmers tending their fields, children playing by streams, traders leading their goods to market. Each encounter was brief, but each left behind a small mark, like a footprint in soft soil. One evening, he stopped by a roadside shrine. It was simple, just a wooden box with offerings of flowers, fruit, and coins. A young girl was kneeling before it, her head bowed. When she rose, she glanced at Ansu. "I prayed for my father to come home," she said. "Where is he?" Ansu asked. "Far away. He works in the city." "I miss him," Ansu nodded. Missing is like standing at the shore, watching a boat that has sailed away. You can wait for it to return, or you can turn and see what is here with you now. The girl thought for a moment, then smiled faintly. "I will still hope he comes back," she said. "Hope is fine," Ansu said, "as long as it does not close your eyes to the present." He left her at the shrine and walked until the stars appeared. The road shimmered faintly under the moonlight, and the air was cool. In the distance, he could hear the faint sound of a river. He followed the sound until he found a small clearing where the water flowed over smooth stones. There he sat and listened. The constant movement of the river reminding him that nothing stays still forever. Not grief, not grief, not joy, not even the road beneath his feet. When dawn came, he rose again, ready for whatever the day might carry. Ansu walked through the early morning mist, the damp air clinging to his robes. The world felt muted, as though sound itself had been softened. Birds called in the distance, their voices carrying far in the stillness. The path curved gently uphill, leading him into a region of scattered boulders and sparse grass. By mid-morning the mist had lifted, revealing a wide valley below. A river wound its way through fields, glinting in the sunlight like a silver thread. He descended toward it, passing a shepherd with a small flock of goats. The shepherd lifted a hand in greeting but did not speak, his attention fixed on guiding the animals. At the riverbank, Ansu removed his sandals and stepped into the cool water. The current was gentle, swirling round his ankles. He stood there for a time, feeling the pull of the flow, then crossed to the other side. On the far bank, he found a man mending a fishing net. The man looked up briefly, then returned to his work. "This net has many holes," Ansu observed. The man grunted. "It was torn in a storm. I patch it every day, but new holes appear." Ansu crouched beside him. "Then perhaps it is time for a new net." The man's hands stilled. "I cannot afford one." "Then you will patch until you can," Ansu said, "but patch without anger. If you curse the holes, they will grow larger in your mind than in the net." The man gave a faint smile. "Perhaps that is true." Leaving the river behind, Ansu followed a dirt road that led into farmland. The smell of tilled earth and wildflowers drifted on the breeze. He passed workers bent over rows of crops, their movements steady and practiced. At one field, a woman knelt with her hands in the soil, pulling weeds. She straightened as Ansu approached. "Are you traveling far?" she asked. "As far as the road takes me," he replied. She brushed soil from her hands. "I used to dream of traveling, but now I stay here. My parents are old, and the land needs tending. Sometimes I feel trapped." Ansu looked at the field, green and alive under the sun. "A tree cannot walk," he said, "but it can reach far through its roots and branches. There is more than one kind of journey." She nodded slowly, as if turning his words over in her mind. Ansu continued on, the road stretching ahead in a gentle line toward the horizon. The next day, the weather changed. Dark clouds rolled in from the west, and a cold wind swept over the land. By afternoon, rain began to fall, first in soft drops, then in heavy sheets. Ansu pulled his hood up and walked on, the sound of the rain like drumming on the earth. He came to a small wooden bridge crossing a swollen stream. Halfway across, he found a boy sitting on the planks, shivering. "Why are you here?" Ansu asked over the roar of the water. "I tried to run away," the boy said, his voice trembling. "But I'm too cold to go on." Ansu sat beside him. Running away does not mean you will escape. Often it only means you will arrive somewhere else with the same burdens. The boy hugged his knees. "Then what should I do?" "Go back, if what you left can be mended. If it cannot, then walk forward with an open heart, not a clenched fist." The boy hesitated, then rose. Together they crossed the bridge and returned to the road. At the next fork, the boy turned toward a cluster of houses. Ansu watched until he disappeared from sight, then continued his own path. The rain eased by evening, leaving the air fresh and cool. In the fading light, Ansu reached a roadside shrine sheltered by a large tree. He sat there for the night, listening to the dripping leaves and the quiet hum of crickets. Morning brought clear skies. Ansu followed the road to a hilltop village where smoke rose from chimneys. The people there were busy preparing for a festival. Strings of colorful cloth fluttered between buildings, and tables were laden with baskets of fruit and bread. An old woman invited him to share their feast. "Today we give thanks for the harvest," she said. "You should eat with us." Ansu joined them, tasting sweet bread and ripe pears. Children laughed and ran through the square, their hands sticky with honey. The air was filled with music from a flute, soft and wandering. During the meal, a man complained about his neighbor taking the largest share of the best fruit. Ansu listened, then said, "A basket heavy with envy will always feel heavier than one filled with fruit." The man fell silent, his eyes dropping to his plate. The music played on, and Ansu sat quietly, feeling the warmth of the sun on his back. After the festival, he left the village and traveled toward a range of low hills. The path narrowed, winding between stones and patches of dry grass. Near the crest of a hill, he met a traveler carrying a heavy pack. The man was sweating and breathing hard. "This climb is endless," the man groaned. "My legs ache, my back aches, and I still have far to go." Ansu glanced at the pack. "Set it down for a while." "I can't. I have to keep moving. Even a river rests in a pool before it falls again," Ansu said. Reluctantly, the man set the pack down. They sat together on a rock, looking at the view. After a few minutes, the man sighed. "It's lighter now." Ansu smiled. "It is not the hill that makes you tired, but how tightly you hold your burdens." They parted on the other side of the hill, each going in a different direction. Ansu's road led him through a forest where the air smelled of pine and earth. The canopy above was thick, allowing only scattered beams of sunlight to reach the ground. By midday, he came upon a small clearing where a woman was tending a fire. She was boiling herbs in a pot, the steam carrying a sharp, clean scent. She offered him a cup of the herbal drink, saying it would warm him. He accepted it, and as they sat by the fire, she spoke of her work as a healer. "People come to me wanting quick remedies," she said, "but many pains do not leave quickly. They must be lived through." Ansu nodded. Wounds of the body and wounds of the heart heal in the same way, slowly, if you let them. Not at all, if you keep opening them. They shared the fire until the sun began to set. Then Ansu continued on, carrying the faint taste of the herbs with him. The following days passed in steady rhythm. He rose with the light, walked until the sun dipped low, and found rest wherever the road allowed. Each place brought new faces and new moments. A farmer who taught him the names of local birds. A potter who showed him how clay became smooth under steady hands. A child who gave him a wildflower without saying a word. One afternoon he reached a broad river spanned by a stone bridge. On the far side, a merchant was arguing with a guard who refused to let him pass without paying a higher toll. The merchant's voice was sharp, the guard's voice sharper still. Ansu stood nearby, listening. When there was a pause, he said, "Two hands pulling on opposite ends of a rope cannot untie the knot between them." The guard frowned, the merchant scowled, but the words seemed to settle in their minds. After a moment, the guard lowered the toll slightly, and the merchant paid without another word. As Ansu crossed the bridge, the sound of the river below filled his ears. The water surged around the stone pillars, a reminder of how even the strongest walls were shaped by time and flow. The land beyond the river was open and flat, dotted with low shrubs and the occasional tree. The sky stretched wide overhead, pale blue by day and filled with stars by night. Ansu felt a growing stillness in himself, as though the road had smoothed away the noise of his thoughts. One evening, he found a solitary tree standing alone in a field. Its branches were twisted, its bark scarred, yet it stood firm. He sat beneath it and closed his eyes, feeling the wind move through its leaves. He thought of the many people he had met, each holding on to something: anger, grief, fear, or longing. He thought of how easily they could be dragged by those weights, and how the simple act of letting go could set them free. The stars came out one by one, and he lay back in the grass, the earth cool beneath him. Sleep came gently, without effort. In the morning, he rose and continued walking, the sun warm on his face. The road ahead curved slightly, disappearing into the distance. He did not know where it would lead, but he knew he would follow it until his feet told him to stop. The sun rose slowly over the open plain, turning the grass a soft gold. Ansu walked at an easy pace, his breath calm, his steps steady. The air was cool in the early hours, carrying the faint scent of earth and distant flowers. In the far distance, a range of mountains rose like the spine of a sleeping giant. The road curved toward them, though they still seemed days away. By mid-morning, he reached a cluster of small houses beside a shallow stream. A few people were washing clothes in the water, their voices low. One old man sat apart on a rock, staring into the current. Ansu stopped nearby. "It is a good morning to be by the water," he said. The man did not look at him. "The water moves, but I do not. I am stuck." Ansu followed the man's gaze to the stream. Leaves floated past, spinning gently. "Even a stone in the water is moved, though slowly," he said. "Perhaps you are moving without knowing." The man gave a small shake of his head, but there was a hint of thoughtfulness in his eyes. Leaving the village, Ansu followed the stream for several miles before it widened into a shallow lake. The surface was perfectly still, reflecting the clouds above. A fisherman in a small boat was untangling his lines, moving with slow patience. Ansu stood on the shore, watching until the man waved in greeting. "Are you traveling far?" The fisherman called. "As far as my feet will carry me," Ansu replied. The fisherman nodded. "Then may your steps be light and your burdens lighter." Ansu smiled at the blessing, turned, and continued down the road. The days ahead were long but gentle. The weather stayed fair, and the road wound through fields, forests, and the edges of quiet villages. He met a beekeeper who spoke of how the bees worked together without envy or pride. He met a boy learning to carve wood, his shavings piling up like tiny curls of cloud. Each meeting left a small mark on him, a reminder of the shared threads that ran through all lives. One afternoon, he came to a bridge spanning a deep ravine. The wind was strong there, tugging at his robe. Halfway across, he saw a young woman sitting against the rail, her face turned toward the drop below. He stopped a short distance away. "It is a long way down," he said. She didn't move. "Sometimes I think about falling, just to stop feeling so heavy." Ansu stood in silence for a moment, the wind swirling between them. "If you fall, you will not be lighter. You will simply not be here to notice the weight lift on its own." Her eyes flickered toward him. "And if it never does, it will answer you," said softly. "But you must give it the chance." She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and then rose slowly. Without looking at him again, she walked toward the far end of the bridge. He followed after a moment, letting her go ahead. Beyond the ravine, the land began to rise. The road climbed in long curves, each turn revealing a wider view of the valleys behind. The higher he went, the cooler the air became, carrying the crisp scent of pine. At night, the stars seemed closer, as if leaning down to watch the earth. In a small mountain village, Ansu met an elderly weaver. She invited him into her home, a low building with walls lined in baskets of yarn. As she worked, her hands moved with practiced rhythm. "Every thread must be pulled with care," she said. "Too tight, and the cloth warps. Too loose, and it falls apart." Ansu nodded. "It is the same with the threads of life." The weaver smiled. "And yet people pull at them in anger, wondering why they fray." He stayed there for 2 nights, helping to fetch water and wood. When he left, she gave him a small woven band, saying it would remind him of balance. The road from the village led him higher still, into quiet forests, where the air was cool and the ground soft with fallen needles. Sometimes he walked for hours without seeing anyone. The solitude felt natural, as if the road itself was a companion. One morning, he came upon a man struggling to push a cart up a steep slope. The wheels slipped on loose stones, and the man's face was red with effort. "Would you like help?" Ansu asked. The man shook his head. "This is my burden to carry." Ansu stepped aside, but watched as the man strained against the weight. After several more attempts, the man finally sat down, breathing hard. "You could take some of the load out and carry it in pieces," Ansu said. The man frowned. "That would take longer." "Sometimes slower is faster," Ansu replied. "When the road is steep, carrying everything at once is the surest way to stop moving at all." The man didn't answer, but after a while, he began unloading the cart. Farther along, the path narrowed to a ledge cut into the mountainside. To his right, the wall rose sharply. To his left, the ground fell away into a deep valley. The wind was constant here, carrying the cry of distant birds. At a bend, Ansu met a shepherd, guiding his goats along the ledge. They paused to let each other pass, and the shepherd said, "You walk alone in a place where a wrong step could end you." Ansu smiled. "I place my feet where they belong, and so far they have carried me." The shepherd nodded as they went their separate ways. By evening, Ansu reached a high plateau where the ground was covered in low grass and scattered stones. In the distance, he could see the snow-capped peaks of the higher mountains. He made a small fire that night, watching the flames dance against the darkness. In the days that followed, the road grew rougher. Streams ran down from the mountains, crossing his path in cold, clear flows. He drank from them, the water sharp and refreshing. The silence was deeper here, broken only by wind and the occasional rustle of animals moving unseen through the brush. One morning, he came upon a cave in the hillside. Its entrance was half hidden by shrubs, but inside it was dry and cool. On the walls, someone long ago had carved simple shapes, circles, lines, the outline of a hand. Ansu sat there for some time, wondering about the person who had left those marks. Perhaps they, too, had walked a long road. Perhaps they had also learned that the weight we carry is often of our own making. When he left the cave, the sun was high and the air was warm. He walked on, following the curve of the road until it descended into another valley. This one held a small monastery surrounded by gardens. The monks there welcomed him without question, offering food and a place to rest. For several days, Ansu stayed, helping in the gardens and walking the stone paths in quiet meditation. He spoke little, letting the rhythm of simple work settle in his mind. One afternoon, a young monk approached him. "I have heard of you," the monk said. "They say you have walked far and seen many places. What have you learned?" Ansu thought for a moment. "I have learned that letting go is not the same as losing. It is making space for what is meant to come." The young monk considered this, then bowed and left without another word. When the time felt right, Ansu continued his journey. He left the monastery at dawn, the sound of the morning bell fading behind him. The road led toward the highest mountains he had yet seen, their slopes white with snow even in summer. The climb was slow, the air thinner with each step, but he did not rush. He walked as he always had, steady and present, letting each moment arrive fully before it passed. On the third day of climbing, he reached a ridge where the land dropped away on both sides. He could see valleys stretching out for miles, rivers like silver threads weaving between them. The wind was strong, but it carried a deep stillness, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. He stood there a long time, feeling the weight of all he had carried and all he had set down. He thought of the people he had met, the fisherman, the weaver, the boy on the bridge, the man with the cart. Each had been a mirror, showing him something about his own burdens. As the sun began to sink, he sat on a flat stone and closed his eyes. The wind moved around him, but he did not move with it. There was no urge to go forward, no urge to turn back. Only the road, the sky, and the simple truth that had followed him all along. Let go or be dragged. When he opened his eyes, the first stars were appearing. He rose, adjusted his robe, and began walking again, not because he needed to reach somewhere, but because the road was there, and his feet were ready to meet it. And so, dear listener, the monk's journey does not truly end for every road. Every sunrise and every quiet step is simply part of a longer path. Along the way, he learned that the heaviest burdens are often the ones we hold inside, and that letting go is not a loss, but an opening for peace, for kindness, for the unexpected beauty of life to arrive without struggle. Maybe, as you listen, you have felt your own burdens shift, even just a little. Maybe you've remembered something you've been carrying for too long. Tonight, as you close your eyes, I invite you to place those weights down, if only for now. Let them rest beside you. Feel the space it creates in your heart, in your mind, in the gentle rhythm of your breath. The monk walks on still, somewhere under the same stars that now shine above you. His steps are slow, unhurried, and without fear. May your own path be as steady. May your nights be soft, your mornings light, and your spirit free from the things that try to pull you back. Good night, and remember, let go or be dragged.